Take a look at the risks that you've documented based on the first paragraph that we've spoken about. Ask yourself whether you've explained, and read them again and look at whether or not you have actually explained why that particular risk is a problem, or what the impact is. Have you actually explained what the impact is on the fair presentation of the financial statements? Have you explained why it is a problem? You cannot merely identify the risk and say, because this company sells items overseas, because there are foreign transactions, this increases the risks. And this is what we constantly find as examiners and lecturers when students create risks, and when they write out risks, they go, there is a risk of material misstatement in the financial statements because the company sells their products overseas. Full stop. You haven't told me anything. All you've said is you've repeated the information in the question and then said it's a risk. What you haven't done is tell me why it's a risk. What is the problem here? What is this going to cause? What damage are you expecting this to have? What is the problem? Okay, so what you need to be able to do, if you're worried about this, if you read through and you can't actually connect the risk with the impact on the financial statements or the impact on the audit, you haven't answered the question properly. And in a lot of cases, what I tell students to do is to write out their risk, and at the end, when they're done, write because. And this will force you to answer that question and then go, okay, now because what? Why is this a risk? It's a risk because they won't get the reporting right, because there may be a law that they're not complying with that they don't know about, because they may stuff up the answer or they may stuff up the results in the financial statements, because it incentivizes them to manipulate the financial statements, or whatever the case is. So sometimes adding because onto the end of your risk will help you trigger the fact that you've got to tell me what the impact is. You've got to tell me what the problem is. What I'm going to do quickly is take a look at our solutions, take a look at the suggested solution. And I want to show you a couple of structures, and I've changed the way that these are written so that they all are slightly different, or the structure is slightly different. And this is to help you realize, one, that not all of your risks look the same. People can communicate risks in completely different ways and still get the same marks for it. And two, that there are certain things that you've got to make sure that you include in there. So let's take a look at the solution. What I've tried to do is minimize the amount of writing that I do. So the first thing I want you to notice is that instead of continually saying in every single line, this increases the risk of material misstatement, this increases the risk of material misstatement, this increases the risk of material misstatement, you'll notice that I've done that at the top. I've said right in the beginning, the risk of material misstatement may be increased due to the following. So I'm very clear about the fact that at this point in time, I'm dealing with material misstatement, and these are the things that may increase that, which means I do not have to keep including the phrase, and this increases the risk of material misstatement. And you can see in your own writing how many times you're repeating yourself, and that's a huge waste of time. So I'm starting off by saying the following items are going to increase the risk of material misstatement. Now I just need to go down and actually answer that. The next thing you'll see I've done is I've put the risk indicator itself and as a heading at the top of my point, and I've limited it to a couple of words, 3 or 4 words. Instead of rewriting the entire case study, which the examiner already knows, okay, I just indicate that this is what I'm looking at. If you and I were talking, okay, and you weren't writing an exam, if you and I were talking and I said to you, tell me what the risk is, you could point to something and say, you see that information over there? That, let me tell you about the risk. That's what I'm trying to do in an exam. And you go, see that information over there, Yvonne? That, let me tell you what the risk is over there. That's what you're doing to an examiner. First of all, you want to point to the information that has created the risk. That's the risk indicator, right? The information that indicates that there is a problem. But you don't want to spend your entire time rewriting that. You don't have to say, Flora Bulk sells flowers locally and internationally. This increases the risk of material misstatement because. And now you're only getting to the marks, right? Now, when you've got the because, now you're only getting to where the marks lie. Up to that point, you've given me a long sentence, but you haven't actually said anything. Flora Bulk sells flowers locally and internationally. That's from the question. Means nothing to me. You're not going to get a mark for that. This increases the risk of material misstatement because up to this point, you've also told me nothing. I've asked you to discuss the risks of material misstatement, so you haven't answered the question. But for a lot of students, that's where they end. Flora Bulk sells flowers locally and internationally. This increases the risk of material misstatement. It's a big mouthful. It takes a long time to write, but you've said nothing. Okay, so be very careful about that. It's only the information that comes after the because that's actually going to get you marks. And you haven't even got to that yet. And it's taken you 2 minutes to write down. So what I've done is I've put half the sentence in as a heading so that I only have to put it in once. My risk indicator, I've put in as 3 or 4 words. They sell stuff internationally, trading with foreign countries. That's the information that I want to discuss with you. That is the indicator. Now let me tell you why it's a problem. And this is where the important part is. This is what the examiner wants to see. So I told you that there's foreign trade. What is the problem here? What are you actually worried about? This is where the marks lie. This is the part that comes after the because. So we want to get to that as fast as possible. The other reason that I really want you to start using these as headings is because it makes sure then that when you actually get to the risk, you can't just repeat yourself. So by doing this, by saying risks of material misstatement will increase because of the following, but putting your risk indicator as headings means that you're now left with a sentence you have to create that you now can't just repeat it. You can't just repeat the information in a case study, and you can't just go, oh, it's a risk, because you've already said that. Now you have to actually get to the crux of the matter. So this helps force you to tell me what the risk actually is. Okay? And it's hard to start off with, but it's guaranteed to get you marks because you're going to start saving time once you get used to it. And I know it is a problem. Communication is a big issue when it comes to your auditing. So let's take a look at this. Flora Bulk might not comply with all the legal and regulation requirements of the different companies or the different countries. That's the crux of the problem here. The fact that you've got foreign trade, I don't really care about all that other crap. The problem, the big issue here is the fact that there's a compliance issue with laws and regulations. And compliance issues are always material by nature, not necessarily by amount. We're not quite sure exactly what those laws are and how they would impact. It affects the financial statements as a whole. If you say to a person, he has a set of financial statements for a company that's not complying with laws, how do you feel about that company? It doesn't matter what's written on those financial statements. It doesn't matter what the numbers are. It doesn't matter whether they're out by 1 rand or 1 million rand. It is absolutely irrelevant. All you care about and all the information that's sitting in your head is they're not complying with laws. That becomes material by nature. It's a financial statement level risk. It affects the picture of the financials as a whole. Here is a set of financials. And here is a set of financials for a company that does not comply with law. Immediately, this one you're concerned about. You don't even care what the profits and losses are in these. But this one you're worried about. It influences the user's opinion. Compliance with laws and regulations. Next one. There were changes in industry regulation. I've managed to sum that up in 3 words. Industry regulation changes. I don't have to repeat the entire sentence. The examiner knows that that's now what I'm talking about. I'm talking about industry regulation changes. Errors might occur in compliance and reporting due to Flora Bulk's uncertainty of the new legal and regulatory requirements. The problem with change is always uncertainty. It's new and I don't know what it is. Anything that's new is more likely to have an error because people don't know what they're doing. When something's new, there's a transition. That's the problem. Don't just tell me there's a risk because something's changed. What impact does that have? 1, there's a possibility that you might battle with compliance because you don't know what you're doing. And 2, there's a possibility that there's a reporting requirement in the financial statements that's now new and you don't know what that is. Okay, so industry regulation changes, errors might occur in compliance and reporting due to Flora Bulk's uncertainty of the new legal and regulatory requirements. Sums it up beautifully, tells me exactly what you think the risk is going to be. Loss of major customers. Again, I've managed to sum up that entire sentence about because of the regulation changes, we've now lost 3 of our customers. Loss of major customers. Losing 3 of their 5 major clients may place the going concern ability of Flora Bulk into question, which might not be disclosed or accounted for properly. This is really important when it comes to going concern. As an auditor, I don't care if your company is going to fall apart. I do not care if your company is going down the drain. What I care about is whether or not you've disclosed it properly. I'm not supposed to care that your company is going down the drain. If I do care about your profitability as an auditor, it means that I'm not independent, right? So I don't care. I'm not interested in whether or not your company is going down the drain. What I am interested in is, have you told the users that? Has it been disclosed and has it been accounted for properly? So when you discuss going concern risks, never just stop with there's a going concern problem. That's a business risk. Okay? That's a risk for the business. The risk of material misstatement lies in the fact that there are going concern problems that haven't been disclosed properly. That's where our concern is. So make sure we're aware of that. Pending litigation. The possible litigation may involve fines and penalties. Get to the crux of the matter. So what that they're going to be sued? What is the possible impact on the financial statements? Where does the risk lie? It lies in the fact that there might be penalties and fines which haven't been disclosed. Again, if you have penalties and fines, I don't care. It's not my problem. One, that's a business risk. The fact that you're going to have to pay fines and penalties is not my problem. What is my problem as an auditor is, have you told the users about it? Okay? The impact of these legal issues may be large enough to affect their going concern assumption, which may also not be disclosed properly. Again, there's a possibility that might come down to going concern, and my concern there is that they haven't been disclosed properly. Okay, so it might just be related to the fines and penalties that haven't been disclosed, or it might be a fact that this is going to be so big that it affects your going concern, and that's going to be a problem. So the way that I've structured this, what I've tried to do with these is to say, how do you, in your answers, how do you get to a point where you can make sure you're actually answering the question? You've got to tell me the risk of material misstatement has increased. We've done that right up front. You've got to tell me what information in the case study or in the question led you to believe there was a problem, but we've summarized that. Trade with foreign countries, change in legislation, pending litigation, change in ownership, change in management, new auditors, tight audit deadline. Sum it up in as small as possible, and then spend your time rather making sure that you can absolutely communicate those risks. Getting to these sentences is not as easy as it seems, and you're only going to know that once you've done a couple of questions and you start tearing your hair out. Auditing is about communication. You know it's a risk. There's no question that you can look through that and tick all these little things off in the case study and go, ooh, that's a problem. Ooh, that's a risk. Ooh, that's a risk. Now put it down on paper. Now go back, put it down on paper, and see whether or not you are actually capable of identifying exactly what the impact is on the financial statements or the impact on the audit. What is the actual risk? This is a type of thing that students get wrong all the time. Most students that I come across battle with this. Okay, so the reason that I emphasize this is because in the years that I've lectured, this is always a problem for students. They always battle to close the end of that sentence and actually tell me what the problem is. Okay, if this is not an issue for you, then fine, by all means, go to the next lecture, carry on with the question and do your thing. That's fine. But if this is a problem for you, you've got to make sure that you get this down. You've got to make sure that you fix this. The best way to do this is to structure this the way that I've given you so that you can force yourself to start getting to the stuff as early as possible and get those marks in. If you do battle with this, I want you to take this. Ignore my solution. I want you to go back and write it out for yourself. Not based on a memory dump of what I've done and try and remember what did she say, how did she say it, because you're never going to remember that in an exam. You've got to find a way to learn your own communication style and to get your own communication across. So go back with these particular indicators, go back and make sure that you can do that you can communicate properly. It's all well and good when you've seen the risk indicator 500 times. We all know, oh, foreign trade, we know that's a risk. Why is it a risk? No, I can't quite get there. But what about the day that I put a risk in a case study that you haven't seen before? You know it's a risk, but you've never seen it in a question before, so you haven't had the chance to learn off by heart exactly how to communicate that. That's the one that we are trying to get to. So go back, try this again yourself. Make sure that you start working on those communication skills.